Up next in the broadcast, voters went to the polls in a special by-election to fill 15 seats in the National Assembly. Observers say it's a litmus test of the current administration and leadership of the main opposition party. We'll have the latest exit polls for you coming up. The latest industrial production went up over 2% month on month, and while that may look like the economy is picking up, analysts caution that activity may just be stabilizing from the sharp drop following April's ferry disaster. And the United States and the European Union announced strong international action in the form of new sanctions against Russia for Moscow's suspected involvement in the ongoing Ukraine conflict. Primetime News begins now.
Hello, welcome to Primetime News. Live from Seoul, I'm Kang Tae-ri.
And I'm Sean Lim. Thanks for joining us tonight. We begin with the latest on the by-elections. Polls are now closed and vote counters are busy tallying ballots for 15 parliamentary seats that represent constituencies nationwide.
Some call it a mini general election, as the outcome of today's voting holds great implications not only for the parties but also for the Park Geun-hye administration. And for a better look at the expected outcome and the party's reactions, we have Choi Yoo-san at the News Center and Ji Myung-gil standing by for us at the National Assembly. Yoo-san, let's start off with you and start with today's voter turnout.
The National Election Commission says the overall turnout today was 30.9%, and that includes the amount of votes cast during last week's early voting period. 32.9% is less than the by-election average of 35.3%, but close to the turnout of 33.5% from the most recent by-election held in October of last year.
Right, so this, of course, is lower than the 50% range turnout in the last June 4th local elections and the mid-70% turnout recorded in the 2012 presidential election.
Right, but the 30% range comes as no surprise, as voting day fell on a weekday and at the peak of summer vacation season. And having said that, I should also mention turnout was considered a major determinant in today's elections, as more than half of the constituencies did not clearly support one party over the other. In the past, the ruling party fared better when the turnout was low, while the opposition benefited from a higher turnout. And that's because conservative older voters tend to cast ballots more so than the liberal younger generation voters.
And we have to talk about last week's two-day early voting, seeing a turnout of nearly 8%, which is the highest level recorded from an earlier voting system.
Right, the higher than expected participation led many to wonder whether that trend would continue on the actual voting day. And what's interesting is that the districts that had rival candidates neck and neck in pre-election polls saw greater turnout, whereas those with a strong party preference had a much lower participation rate. The highest turnouts were observed in the hotly contested Suncheon Gukseong of Jeollanam-do province and in the Dongjak-bi district of Seoul, with a turnout of 51% and 47% respectively.
And Suncheon Gukseong region that you just mentioned is a traditional opposition liberal stronghold where President Park Geun-hye's close aide and former press secretary Lee Jung-yeon is running a very tight race against the former President Roh Moo-hyun's aide, Seo Gab-won.
Right, and over in Dongjak-bi, that's where the former Seoul mayor candidate Na Kyung-won is competing against No Hae-chan of the Minor Justice Party. And this is a strategically important constituency where we saw a dose of political drama, which in the end merged opposition party contenders to run against Na Kyung-won. And with this merger, it will be very interesting to watch how Na Kyung-won's support will be impacted. And we can expect to see a better picture of which party will claim victory after 11 p.m. tonight.
So it's been more than 2 hours since voting ended, and presumably the rival party leaders and the candidates are anxiously waiting for the results. Let's go over now to the National Assembly, where our political correspondent Ji Myung-gil is standing by.
And so, Myung-gil, how are the parties getting ready to hear the results?
Hello again, Cherry. You are right. Both rival parties are anxiously awaiting results, which are expected to be more clearly revealed within the hour. The ruling Saenuri Party's chairman, Kim Moo-sung, and the party's Supreme Council members are monitoring the ballot countings at Saenuri Party's headquarters. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy's co-leaders are now at the National Assembly and are discussing and analyzing the neck-and-neck regions within the party's electoral districts. Candidates from both rival parties are at their respective camps monitoring the situation and taking a short rest after nearly 2 weeks of election campaigns. They are hoping that although the by-election coincided with the summer vacation season, people got out to cast ballots after work in their respective constituencies. Traditionally, if the voter turnout is high in a specific district, then the votes tend to work in favor of the opposition parties. But if the voter turnout is low, then it usually works in favor for the governing party. And as ballot counting is still ongoing, both rival parties do not have a clear view yet on who will be the winner. But they're not letting down their hopes of victory in traditional stronghold regions. The ruling Saenuri Party is expected to win in the Conservatives' home turf in the city of Ulsan and Busan in Gyeongsang-namdo province, while the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is hoping to take in seats for the liberal strongholds of the Jeollanam-do provinces. As voter turnout topped 50% in the Suncheon and Gokseong regions, hopes are high for the main opposition party. The unpredictable districts are especially focused within Seoul and Gyeonggi-do province, areas surrounding the capital. The rival parties' candidates are also showing neck-and-neck races in the city of Suwon and Pyeongtaek. In the Suwon-si constituency, the former opposition party leader Son Hak-gyu is running against the ruling party candidate Kim Yong-nam. In the Suwon-D constituency, former President Lee Myung-bak's chief of staff Im Tae-hee is running against former news anchor and reporter Park Kwang-won. But again, we'll have to wait and see for the ballot count to see which party garners most support.
All right, let's go back to our Yusun. So Yusun, I think we could come up with 3 scenarios here. Number 1, the ruling party winning more seats and securing the majority in parliament. Number 2, the opposition party coming out the victor. And lastly, a tie between the 2 rival parties. Everything's up in the air.
You're right. If the ruling Saenuri Party takes at least 9 seats, more than half of the total 15 today, it would regain majority in the National Assembly. And this would give momentum to the passage of bills aimed at revitalizing the economy, those related to next year's budget, as well as President Park's government restructuring and other reform-related bills put forth in the aftermath of April's ferry disaster.
And the victory, if potential victory here, could give the new party leader Kim Moo-sung a chance to cement his authority in the party and build a healthy, tighter relationship with the presidential office, because he's been promising to not hesitate in delivering the party and the people's opinions to the president.
Right, but if the Saenuri Party only takes less than 6 seats, the political tug-of-war with the opposition party will intensify, further delaying passage of key bills and hampering the president's running of state affairs. This would cause the president to lose more ground, as she has already seen her support ratings drop significantly after the government's mishandling of the ferry disaster and a series of failed personnel appointments. The outcome is also expected to create tension and conflict amongst different factions within the ruling party.
And how will the electoral results affect the opposition and in its quest to solidify power?
Well, if the opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy wins at least 9 seats in total, the biggest benefactors will be the party's co-leaders Kim Han-gil and An Cheol-soo. Their leadership has repeatedly been questioned after the party failed to sweep the June local elections amid public anger over the government's response to the ferry accident, as well as during candidate nominations for today's elections.
And of course, I would expect the opposition to gain power in voicing its concerns over the lineup of pending bills and even in the running of state affairs.
Right. However, if the opposition takes 6 seats or less, it would deal a heavy blow to the party and possibly lead to a breakup amongst the different factions within the party. If support is lost, the leadership may be forced to resign and the party could hold an early convention. And a near tie of 7 to 8 seats for each side would have less of an effect but cause some friction within each party.
All right, a long night for many of us in the press as well as in the parties, and we'll leave it there for now. Well, thank you so much for that report, Yusan and Myung-gil. Curry's comments came in response to
your gateway to the day's biggest stories in Korea and around the world. Breaking news, the hottest interviews, and a whole lot more. Join Arirang, Sean Lim, and Kang Chae-ri from the heart of Seoul.
News begins now.
Primetime news, weeknights, live at 10 on Arirang TV.
The Korean government says it's injecting about $25 billion into the Korean economy through fiscal measures and policy financing in the latter half of this year. This is part of a $40 billion stimulus package announced last week. Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan also told policymakers today that the government will soon introduce measures to boost the service sector with the goal of creating more jobs and perking up spending. The Korean economy saw a quarterly growth of 0.6% in the second quarter of this year, its weakest pace in over a year. Korea's industrial production rose over 2% in June from the previous month, but analysts say it's largely because output was just too low in May following the April ferry disaster. Na Hyun-kyung tells us more.
A 2.1% monthly rise for all industries and a 2.9% jump in the mining and manufacturing sector in production for the month of June. Statistics Korea says those were the biggest gains in more than 3 years and nearly 5 years, respectively. But analysts say it's merely because of a base effect.
The June numbers look good because we saw a big drop in May. The increase in domestic shipments of manufacturing goods is very weak. A bigger problem, though, is that overseas shipments are showing negative numbers, meaning exports have not been able to overcome the sluggish economy either. Investment in construction, as well as plants and equipment, are also slowing because of weak domestic demand and unfavorable conditions in the global economy.
The near 3% rise in the mining and manufacturing sector is attributed to increased output in semiconductors and metal processing, driven by demand from both home and abroad. But investment in plants and equipment went down by 1.4% from May, and spending also only edged up by 0.3%. Although it was the first time the overall monthly output has risen since April's ferry disaster, experts say it's too early to say the economy is emerging out of its sluggish trap. They add it doesn't mean the Korean economy is not improving, but the rate it's picking up is still pretty slow. Na Hyun-kyung, Arirang News.
Although they're still number one, Samsung's strong grip on the smartphone market loosened considerably in the second quarter of this year. And the threat is coming from the rise of Chinese players luring away customers with their cheaper models. Hwang Jae has the details.
Samsung is looking black and blue after getting a blow from its Chinese competitors in the smartphone market. Market research firm IDC says the Korean tech giant's share of the global smartphone market plunged to just over 25% in the second quarter of this year. Although it managed to retain the top spot globally, its market share dropped more than 7 percentage points from the previous year. The number of Samsung smartphones shipped also fell almost 4% in the April to June period to 74.3 million units. During that same period, however, the global smartphone market expanded 23% to 295 million units. So which players expanded the handset market? The Chinese. Huawei, China's biggest maker of smartphones, nearly doubled shipments in the second quarter to 20.3 million units, holding down third place in terms of market share with 6.9%. Another Chinese tech firm, Lenovo, also gained market share with 5.4%, taking fourth place. Its shipments climbed almost 40% to 15.8 million units. IDC says the Chinese companies are attracting customers, especially from emerging markets, with lower prices compared to top global rivals like Samsung and Apple. Apple also saw its market share dip by about 1 percentage point to 11.9%. 황지혜, Arirang News.
Becoming a leader of a company sounds like a fancy job that needs hard work to accomplish, but here in Korea, if you hold that title, you may not last so long. Corporate research firm CEO Score said that the average term in office for a Korean CEO is 2.6 years. That's shorter than the minimum 3 years guaranteed under commercial law. While almost 18% of CEOs stayed in their companies for less than a year, nearly two-thirds stepped down in less than 3 years. The survey of some 580 CEOs at listed companies from the country's 30 largest conglomerates excluded data on chief executives with family ties to the firms. And coming in this evening, North Korea fired off 4 short-range projectiles on this Wednesday. According to South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, only one of the 4 fired in 2 rounds is believed to have landed in the EC in the second test of its kind in under a week. And in a related event, the United Nations Security Council is reportedly meeting next Tuesday to discuss North Korea's recent missile launches. Citing government sources, Yonhap News Agency reports that the council will be briefed by the UN Sanctions Committee, which was established in 2006 after North Korea's first nuclear test. They update the council every 90 days.
The European Union and the United States have jointly placed their strongest pressure yet on Russia.
Our Kim Hyun-bin is at the news center with more details. So Hyun-bin, what do these new sanctions entail to put further pressure on Moscow?
Well, the 28-member European bloc has agreed to implement far-reaching economic sanctions targeting Russia's energy, banking, and defense sectors, even as Moscow continues to deny supporting separatist rebels. Our Song Ji-sun reports.
The European Union and the United States on Tuesday announced further sanctions against Russia in the strongest international action yet over Moscow's support for rebels in eastern Ukraine. In Brussels, the 28-member European bloc agreed to restrictions on the trade of equipment for the oil and defense sectors. Russia's state-run banks will also be barred from raising funds in European capital markets. The move marks the strongest confrontation between Moscow and the West since the end of the Cold War. This latest action was triggered by the downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight 17 by what was likely a Russian-supplied missile. Moscow continues to deny the charges. The U.S. also imposed sanctions on Moscow by banning Americans or people in the U.S. from banking with 3 Russian banks. President Obama said if Russia remains on its current path, the costs on Russia will continue to grow, and that the coordinated actions of the U.S. and EU will make the weak Russian economy even weaker. The sanctions could cost Russia some $30 billion this year, according to online media EU Observer. But if Moscow slaps back with similar action, the EU could suffer damage estimated at $55 billion. To mitigate the impact on the European economy, the new sanctions will not affect previous contracts, and Russia's natural gas, which powers European industry and lights its cities, has been spared. Russia is the world's biggest exporter of natural gas and the second biggest exporter of oil. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
Israel's amped-up offensive on the Gaza Strip continued into early Wednesday morning local time. At least 45 people were reported killed and many others hurt, including 20 in a UN school in the northern region of Jabalia. A health ministry spokesman said among the dead were 5 members of the same family, a medic and an infant, leaving the total death toll over 1,200. This follows Tuesday's overnight strikes that targeted key Hamas infrastructure, including the satellite TV station Al-Aqsa, a central mosque in Gaza City, and the home of a top political leader, Ismail Haniyeh. Israel has rejected reports that it also shot through the area's only power plant. Meanwhile, foreign pressure has been mounting on Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to rein in his forces. Local Israeli reports say a Palestinian delegation, which includes Hamas leaders, was expected to arrive in Cairo for peace talks. One of China's most influential politicians of the last decade is embroiled in a corruption scandal. China's Communist Party on Tuesday said it launched a corruption investigation into former domestic security chief Zhao Yongkang. Zhao is the biggest high-profile figure caught up in President Xi Jinping's crackdown on corruption, as the most senior official to be ensnared in a graft scandal since 1949. News of an inquiry into Zhao's activities were welcomed in Beijing.
Zhou Yongkang was a very high-ranking official. It's good that even high-ranking officials are now being punished for corruption because it sends a warning to lower-ranking officials.
He was a member of the Politburo Standing Committee and held a post of security czar until he retired in 2012. Zhao is accused of corruption involving family members, as well as accepting bribes to promote officials. And that wraps up our look at international stories making headlines around the world. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.
Hello and welcome to sports. Let's start in Seoul as Germany's Bayer Leverkusen here for their Korea tour and the K-League's FC Seoul met on the pitch for a friendly match. It's one of the K-League's top defenses against one of Germany's top-flight offenses. And Leverkusen strikes fast and its spirited attack is awarded with a long-range goal by Bellarabi to make it 1-0 at the half. And Son Heung-min, meanwhile, he presses the goal constantly and shows his attack. FC Seoul also puts on a show, testing the back line at times, but Leverkusen puts down the clamp after Kiesling doubles the score. They beat Seoul 2-0. And more football, this time to the women. South Korean striker Park Eun-sun has inked a deal to play in Russia's Women's Football League. She joins the top division's Rossiyanka Women's Football Club of Moscow, but the contract length and terms have not been revealed. Though there was speculation that the public humiliation she suffered last year after questions arose about her gender was her reason to leave, Park said she wanted to challenge herself and improve her game. And moving on, the father of Juventus forward Carlos Tevez was kidnapped near Argentina's capital city and then freed after 8 hours. The Argentine striker's father, Segundo Tevez, was taken from his car near Buenos Aires, and police say the family was contacted by the kidnappers for a ransom. He was eventually released and neither the police or family confirmed a ransom was paid, but local media reported that a payment ranging from 5 to 6 figures in dollars was made. And leaving that there, let's get to Wednesday's KBO matchup between the LG Twins and Samsung Lions in Daegu. Now we go to the first inning. LG gets on the board first. Lee Jin-young gets 2 home and then a 3-run homer by Lee Byung-gyu. Now both teams add 1, then bottom second, Samsung's Lee Ji-young and Michael Navarro get clutch run-scoring hits. It's tied 6-6. Now the starters are pulled and the relievers keep it level, though there are some chances. Navarro's hit puts Samsung ahead in the 8th inning, but LG's Son Ju-in homers in the 9th, and right now LG leads Samsung 8-7 in the bottom of the 9th inning. And looking at the other games, Nexon takes down Hanwha 6-2, NC wins over Gia 5-4, and finally Lotte beats Tusan 3-1. Well, that's all I have for now. This has been Stephen Che. I'll see you back here later with more from the world of sports.
Welcome to Arirang Weather, everyone. I'm Kim Bo-kyung with the latest update. It was yet another sweltering hot summer day here in Korea. In fact, heat wave advisories have been issued for most parts of the country, including Seoul, Gyeonggi-do, and Daegu, so make sure to drink plenty of water. At the moment, we are seeing mostly clear skies across the map, and due to instability in the atmosphere, showers are in the forecast for tomorrow. So those in Seoul and the southern parts of the nation are looking at about 5 to 40 millimeters. Brace yourselves for another hot one, as Thursday's daytime highs will peak between 31 to 34 degrees. And on Friday, Jeju and the southern coastal areas will be indirectly affected by the 12th typhoon in Nakri. This will lead to cloudy skies and sporadic rainfall. On to Thursday's readings. Seoul hits 33, Daegu soars to 34, Gwangju and Busan to the low 30s. As for other places, Daejeon makes it to 33, Jeju to 31, Dokdo and Mangkumgang to 27 and 29. That'll do it for now. Stay cool, and I'll be back with more updates after midnight. See you then.
Thanks, Bo-kyung. And that's primetime news for this Wednesday. I'm Kang Chae-ri.
And I'm Sean Lim. Stay tuned and come back at midnight for the latest election results on Late Night Edition. Bye-bye.